Yeah, well, the first thing is everyone spies on everyone else, and we first saw this really with the WikiLeaks in sort of 2010,
Mm,
when Angela Merkel was being spied on by the Americans.
yeah.
So the fact the Russians were spying on the Germans and then let that out to try and degrade the Western alliance is no surprise. I think David Cameron's correct that the Western alliance is stronger. There's more unity and purpose. I think the addition of Finland and Sweden as the 31st and 32nd members make that more credible, and that gives a lot more combat power. The Finns are a big army. In terms of the UK defence budget, I don't think there was really any realistic chance of an addition to that budget. The budgetary limits are actually set by the Comprehensive Spending Review. That was actually from the budget of 2021, which takes us to the period up to next year, 2025. So I don't think there would have been extra money this year. Boris Johnson gave an extra £4 billion because particularly the equipment programme always has problems, and the National Audit Office say that there is £16.9 billion of risk over the period 2023 to 2033. But we are in a NATO alliance, and as sort of Montgomery said when he was Deputy Supreme Allied Commander in the 50s. You know, the test match is indefinitely postponed if you've got the deterrence of the Western allies. And European NATO alone outspends Russia by about 4 times. So I don't think we're in a sort of pre-war position. I would like to frame it in the way that the best thing you can do is support Ukraine so that you preserve the long peace which we've really had since 1945.
Yeah, but I guess the question is, how long do you do that for? And at what point do you take other precautions in case there might be other problems? Like, for example, until October the 7th, Ukraine was really the focus of everybody in Europe's attention. But now an awful lot of focus has gone towards Israel and Gaza, because that's also having a major effect, not just in that region, but all over Europe.
Well, there's a lot of diplomatic focus on that, but that doesn't really erode from your vital interests. It does in one sense, and that's what we've been very bad at articulating. So, what are really the vital interests of the UK? Well, we're an island off the coast of Europe, and one of the things we need to do is trade, and therefore the vital sea lanes and choke points are actually vital interests. That's where the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden comes into play here, and why HMS Diamond has been active there, and why we've also been joining in the bombing attacks with the Americans on the Houthis. Spasmodically, of course, because we don't have the ability to do dynamic targeting in the way that the Americans do. We can only do deliberate targeting, that is pre-programmed mission sets.
No, sure. But what I suppose I'm saying is that, you know, the world, by all accounts, and I include some military experts, is a much more dangerous place now than it was perhaps when budgets were being planned 3 or 4 years ago for the military for this country. So surely if the goalposts change, you have to kind of adapt and change the budgets, don't you?
Well, that's partly true, and that you see that more so as you get further towards Ukraine. So the budgets of those who border Ukraine and therefore the closest to Russia have increased exponentially. So 3.9%, for example, for Poland. Just saying it's a percentage of GDP doesn't necessarily buy you a capability. So, for example, in 1991, defense had 3.3% of GDP in the first Gulf War when we had to strip and pillage 3 armored divisions to produce 1. So you need to approach it, in my view, from a capability driven perspective. What is the capability we need to deliver, not from a GDP perspective, because that is strategically illiterate. Now, what we do lack at the moment is a warfighting capability in the army to deliver an armored division. That is because of the equipment coming on stream between 2028 and 2032, particularly with Challenger 3, Boxer, and Ajax. So at the moment, we have a combat incapable army in terms of high-end warfighting. That is why we're no longer referred to as a reference army by America and certain other European armies. We are protected by still quite a capable Navy, even though we'd like more escorts. And of course, the RAF, who are part of the integrated air and missile defense in Europe. One of the big problems, I think, is that we don't have any ballistic missile defense of the UK, or if we do, it's a choice of the T-45s, HMS Diamonds, for example, which are in which is in the Red Sea and being relieved, between protecting carriers or protecting the capital. There are no surface-to-air missile standing sites in the UK. That, to me, is a weakness in the future when you have greater drone warfare and things that need to be knocked out of the sky if the character of war has truly changed.
Yeah, well, indeed. Stay where you are, if you wouldn't mind, Chip. I want to bring in Hugh Andre here, who is, of course, an Army veteran himself, but also CEO of Forceselect. Hugh, very good evening to you. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Mike.
Chip makes out that everything sounds like it's all particularly boo in the world of armed forces for Britain. I'm not sure the evidence would back that up. What do you make of it?
Well, I think we all know what the 7 Ps stand for. Prior planning, preparation, preventing underperformance, and Chip mentioned capability there. And at the moment, certainly the environment that I move in with people leaving the armed forces, within the veterans community, etc., a lot who've left recently, morale is pretty low, and morale, is absolutely, it's of a strategic importance for the fighting capability of any force. But for that force to deliver, they have to have the right kit and equipment. And I think all too often, and I can remember back, whatever it was, 2010, 2012, Force 30, the military personnel are very good, very, very good at planning, training and preparing. But unless they've got the financial support, unless they've got investment coming in from the Treasury, it's not, they've got their hands tied somewhat. But we need more. I think we need more investment, and not just in kit and equipment. We've got camps with substandard accommodation. We've got members of the RAF showering in car parks up in Cambridgeshire with no hot water and no heating, etc. And that degrades the morale of the troops. There are issues currently, not just in kit and equipment, but the operational effectiveness of those forces. I think it needs money, it needs investment.
And of course, we've put 12 billion pounds, I think, into Ukraine since February of 2022, which is an awful lot of money. I mean, Chip, I'll come to you in a second on this, because you'll say that's where we should be spending the money. But surely some of that, even a portion of that, a couple of billion, would have been a good investment into our own armed forces, Hugh.
Well, to be fair, it was at the last budgetary statement in 2023, I think 11 billion was committed by the Chancellor. Ben Wallace was obviously good at shouting loudly. And that was, I believe, my memory serves me correct, split over 3 years in a 5-2-4. But as always, that was a caveat with subject to the fiscal and monetary position of the country. But I think actually the threat to the country and NATO, other NATO allies, etc., should perhaps be considered as a more pressing requirement.
Yes, I wonder. Chip, what do you make of that in terms of the monies going to Ukraine? I mean, could they not have shaved off $1 billion or $2 billion for sort of domestic consumption?
Well, the first thing about the budget for Ukraine is it doesn't come from the defence budget. It comes from the Treasury Reserve in the same way that all operations are paid for from the Treasury Reserve. So HMS Diamond and its missiles and the replenishment of those would come from the Treasury Reserve, not from the defence budget.
But you know what I mean. It's all coming from the same pot at the end of the day, though, isn't it?
Well, it comes from the GDP of the country.
Yeah, exactly.
The key thing about Russia is that it's had 2,900 of its main battle tanks destroyed. That was the persistent enemy. It probably isn't a threat in the next 1, 3, 5 years because of that. It's now deploying T-55 and T-62s. The clue is in those numbers in terms of the years that they were first rolled out. They are not capable tanks. They've got enough problems of their own at the moment in trying to take down Ukraine without worrying about a second front. Should we have more investment in the army? Of course we should. But this is an election year. There are opportunity costs for schools which have concrete cancer, the NHS, the welfare budget, and defence is never seen as a sexy business unless people can really articulate the threat and those vital interests. And that has been, for me, the missing strategic piece about articulating what those really are and making sure each of the services have the right budget to fulfil the capabilities and commitments that they need.
Yeah, and Hugh, I mean, in terms of your position now as as one of the people that helps people to get into other jobs, having left the armed forces, I mean, if they were to be I don't know, surveyed by you as they leave, almost like an exit questionnaire, what would they say is the thing that they would most like to see improved inside of the job that they were doing?
Mike, what worries me more at the moment is the news that came out last week that 52,000 veterans are currently living on universal credit, which sort of reflects back to what Chip's just said about, you know, we do have problems at home that need addressing. But I think, you know, ultimately the issue at the moment is a lot around service life, accommodation. Obviously, the government backed down on the whole housing policy, but this isn't new. The housing accommodation issues have been, you know, rumbling on for quite a few years. And, you know, even when I was serving the same time as Chip in the same brigade in Aldershot, you know, we had, you know, minimal ammunition, you know, and frankly, we were struggling with manpower then. And whenever we went on a deployment, whether it be Northern Ireland or elsewhere, we were borrowing and stealing individuals from other units, the reserves, etc. So this isn't something that's new. It's been happening for the last few decades.
I get you.